So far, we have discussed what the difference between democracy and dictatorship is. This week, we discuss why some countries are democratic and some are dictatorships, and more specifically, what causes countries to become more democratic. This video outlines 3 types of theories about democratization: institutional theories, economic theories, and cultural theories. Institutional theories argue that the specific type of institutions and the order in which you adopt them can help or hurt democratization. Economic theories argue that economic development empowers new social classes that then demand democracy. And cultural theories argue that economic development creates a culture that then demands democracy. Quick comment before I begin. All of these theories talk about democratic transitions. These are specific moments in time when you can clearly see that a dictatorship has become a democracy. Good examples of transition include mass protests leading to the resignation of a dictator, as when Arab Spring protests in Tunisia led to the resignation of former President Ben Ali, or when a ruling party loses power through an election for the first time, as when the PRI lost the 2000 presidential election in Mexico. You will note this presumes we are using a binary definition of democracy. A country is either democratic or authoritarian, and there's a clear change between the two. While this may not be true to life, it's not a terrible description of regime types and transitions during and before the Cold War, so we're going to stick with it for right now. Institutional theories of democratization focus on institutions, unsurprisingly. They argue that the specific choices a country has made about its constitution and laws matter for whether it will become a democracy or not. Robert Dahl's polyarchy is a good example of this type of theory. He argues that democracies are more stable when they expand competition before they expand participation. In other words, when they have a parliament for the elite before they expand voting rights, as was in the UK and the United States. Since that path to democratization isn't really an option anymore, most countries already have universal suffrage, he argues that the type of transition a country had matters. Countries that became democratic through national revolutions are more likely to remain democracies because they're able to define the nation as a democracy from the start. This theory was designed to talk about the first wave of democratization, how European countries became democratic, and why some of them, like the United States, stayed democracies when others, like Germany, became dictatorships. It works better in today's world than you might think, but we're going to leave that conversation for next week. Our main topic this week is what is called modernization theory, the idea that economic development leads to democratization. This argument starts with a very clear correlation between economic development and democracies. Countries that are richer tend to be more democratic. This leads to the question of why? Does economic development actually cause democratization, or does democracy promote economic development? And if economic development causes democratization, how exactly does that work? Modernization theory has its intellectual roots in Marxism and the ideas both that economic relations are the most important thing ever and that development has a logical sequence of events, resulting in an ideal end state, in this case democracy, not communism. But the theory's main originator is Seymour Martin Lipset, who in the 1950s argued that economic development leads to democracy because complex economies require new relationships between firms and workers. Economic development both requires more skilled workers and gives them access to information. These changes empower new social groups, particularly the middle class. And those social groups, again, particularly the middle class, demand more political freedom to go with their economic power. That's why you get democracy. This theory is often used to explain trends toward democratization in Europe and South America in the third wave. Why Spain and Portugal democratized, for example. And it's by far the most common assumption behind democratization today. Finally, cultural theories of democratization are closely related to economic theories. They focus not on the changing power of economic classes as the reason a country democratizes, but on the culture that is fostered by economic change. This theory is currently most closely associated with Ronald Inglehart and Christian Wurzel, who argue that economic development moves countries from traditional values that emphasize respect for authority to values emphasizing the importance of self-expression, because citizens in richer countries no longer need to worry about basic survival needs. Citizens in countries with a greater focus on rational and what they call self-expressive values are more likely to protest then and more likely to demand democracy. In cultural theories, democratic culture is not the result of democracy, but it's instead an intervening variable. Economic development leads to democracy because it changes a country's culture first. Engelhardt and Wetzel, though, argue that it is actually an independent cause, that even holding levels of economic development constant, countries with more emancipative value systems are more likely to be democratic. These three theories all have their advantages and their critiques, and these are the things that we will be talking about in class this week.